In the crisp dawn of a Kentucky morning in 1809, Nancy Hanks Lincoln cradled her newborn son, unaware that the child in her arms would one day lead a nation through its darkest hour. Thomas Lincoln, a carpenter and farmer, gazed upon his son with a mixture of hope and trepidation. They named him Abraham, after his grandfather, a man who had fallen to an Indian's arrow on the wild Kentucky frontier. Young Ab's early years were marked by the harsh realities of frontier life. The Lincoln family's cabin was a humble affair, a single room with a dirt floor and a stick-clay chimney. But within those rough-hewn walls, a keen mind began to form. Nancy, though illiterate herself, recognized the spark of intelligence in her son and encouraged his love for learning. At the age of 7, Abe experienced his first taste of the wider world when the family moved to Indiana. The journey was arduous, cutting through dense forests and fording swollen streams. For young Abe, it was an adventure, each day bringing new sights and experiences. But the excitement of the move was soon overshadowed by tragedy. In 1818, a mysterious illness known as milk sickness swept through their community. Nancy, always ready to help her neighbors, tended to the sick. Her kindness proved fatal. Abe, not yet 10 years old, watched as his mother succumbed to the disease. The loss left an indelible mark on the boy, instilling in him a melancholy that would persist throughout his life. Thomas Lincoln soon remarried, bringing Sarah Bush Johnston into the family. Sarah proved to be a loving stepmother, encouraging Abe's insatiable appetite for knowledge. Under her influence, the Lincoln cabin became a haven of learning. Though books were scarce on the frontier, Abe devoured every volume he could lay his hands on: the Bible, Aesop's Fables, Pilgrim's Progress. By firelight, he would read and reread these treasured tomes, committing long passages to memory. As Abe grew into a young man, his physical stature became as remarkable as his intellect. Standing at 6 feet 4 inches, with arms like steel cables from years of wielding an axe, cut an impressive figure. His strength and skill with an axe earned him the nickname Rail Splitter, a moniker that would later serve him well in politics. At 21, Lincoln struck out on his own, taking a flatboat laden with goods down the Mississippi to New Orleans. It was on this journey that he first witnessed the full horror of slavery. The sight of men, women, and children being bought and sold like cattle left a lasting impression on the young man. Though it would be years before he took a public stand against the institution, the seeds of his future convictions were sown on those New Orleans docks. Returning to Illinois, Lincoln tried his hand at various trades: clerk, postmaster, surveyor. But it was in the field of law that he found his true calling. With characteristic determination, he set about educating himself, borrowing law books and studying late into the night. In 1836, he was admitted to the Illinois bar. As a lawyer, Lincoln gained a reputation for honesty and sharp reasoning. He rode the 8th Judicial Circuit, traveling from county to argue cases. These journeys provided ample opportunity for Lincoln to hone his oratorical skills and to connect with the common people of Illinois. He became known for his ability to break down complex legal issues into simple, relatable terms, often peppering his arguments with humorous anecdotes. It was during this period that Lincoln's political ambitions began to take shape. He served 4 successive terms in the Illinois state legislature as a member of the Whig Party. His time in the State House was marked by his advocacy for internal improvements and his growing opposition to slavery. In 1842, Lincoln's personal life took a turn for the better when he married Mary Todd, a well-educated woman from a prominent Kentucky family. Their courtship had been tumultuous, with Lincoln at one point breaking off their engagement, plunging himself into a deep depression. But they reconciled, and Mary proved to be a stalwart supporter of her husband's political ambitions. The 1850s saw Lincoln's star rise in the political firmament. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, which opened the possibility of slavery's expansion into new territories, galvanized Lincoln's opposition to the institution. In a series of speeches and debates, most notably the Lincoln-Douglas debates of 1858, he articulated a moral and economic case against slavery that resonated with many in the North. Though he lost the 1858 Senate race to Stephen Douglas, Lincoln's performance in the debates catapulted him onto the national stage. In 1860, he secured the Republican nomination for president. The election that followed was one of the most consequential in American history. With the nation teetering on the brink of disunion, Lincoln emerged victorious, becoming the 16th president of the United States. The joy of victory was short-lived. Even before Lincoln took office, Southern states began to secede from the Union. On April 12, 1861, Confederate forces opened fire on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, igniting the Civil War. The next 4 years would test Lincoln as no president had been tested before. He faced military setbacks, political opposition, and personal tragedy. The death of his son Willie in 1862 nearly broke him. Yet through it all, Lincoln's resolve never wavered. He held the Union together through sheer force of will, guiding the nation with a steady hand and a compassionate heart. Lincoln's leadership during the war was marked by his ability to balance competing interests and to articulate a vision of a united, slave-free America. The Emancipation Proclamation, issued on January 1, 1863, transformed the nature of the conflict, making the abolition of slavery an explicit war aim. As the tide of war turned in the Union's favor, Lincoln began to look toward the future. His second inaugural address, delivered on March 4, 1865, called for reconciliation and healing. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds. Tragically, Lincoln would not live to see his vision of a reunited nation fully realized. On April 14, 1865, just days after the surrender of Robert E. Lee's Confederate Army, Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth, Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. The nation mourned as Lincoln's body was carried by train back to Springfield, Illinois. Along the route, millions of Americans paid their respects to the fallen leader. In death, as in life, Lincoln had united the nation. But perhaps Lincoln's greatest legacy lies in his character. Honesty, his compassion, his ability to grow and change. He was a man who could acknowledge his mistakes and learn from them. He was a leader who could disagree with his opponents without demonizing them. In our own divided times, we would do well to remember the example of Abraham Lincoln, the rail splitter who split not his country, but the chains of slavery and bound up a nation's wounds with the bandages of compassion and understanding.